I don't know if I have to begin again. Okay. As, as I said during this session, we will visit different aspects of autonomous vehicles. The two first speakers, Professor Gerd and Dr. Christopher Schlembach, both from the University of Vienna, will focus on automated mobility and inclusion of people with mobility disabilities. The next speakers, coming also from Austria, will be Dr. Bente Knoll and Professor Georg Hauger. They will talk of the components of the automated mobility system, considering aspects of the pre, on, and post-trip, including aspects such as general infrastructure or legislation. The third presentation, it will switch the topic from the characteristics of the passengers and overall infrastructure to the study of driverless cars' behavior by analyzing a specific concept, the traffic flow. Dr. Akito Higatani will defend this work. The last speaker of this session, Dr. Solaz, will concentrate on the overall picture of what exactly may the consequences be in this transition from drivers and occupants to just passengers. I hope you really enjoy the contents of the presentations. You can use the chat to formulate any questions to the panelists at this session, and they will be collected and I will address them at the end of the session. So get started. To get started, I will give the floor to Professor Gerd and Dr. Christopher Schlembach. Gerd is Emeritus Professor at the Institute of Transport Studies, and Christopher Schlembach is a postdoc researcher at the Institute of Sociology and is expert in the participation of vulnerable users groups in the traffic system. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear friends of social inclusion in mobility, we are happy to present you the results of the Austrian National Research Project, Automated Mobility and Inclusion of Mobility Impaired Persons, with the abbreviation AM Inclusive. We means in this case that the presentation is made jointly with by Christopher Schlembach and myself. I hope that Christoph is also online, I think so that the change over to the second part of the work will not create any problems. My name is Gerd and I will start with the topic current situation and perspectives of inclusion, requirements and mobility impaired person. Next. Christoph, next. The presentation of the result of the research project Automated Mobility Inclusive is so extensive that it is divided into parts. This is immediately followed by the second part, components of an inclusive automated mobility system and recommendations. The main objectives of the research project for the mobility and transport sector are: first, analysis of the potential and effects of automated mobility and digitalization for equal opportunities and inclusion in Austria. Second, identification of possible negative systematic effects and exclusion of person groups. And third, involvement of stakeholders from planning and economy, as well as people with disabilities in the development process. Next, please. The importance of inclusion in mobility becomes clear when we are looking at the proportion of the people excluded from mobility. We distinguish three main groups of perceived mobility impairment among the Austrian population. 3% are severely mobility impaired. These are those persons who in practice already receive some consideration in mobility planning today. 13% are severely or moderately mobility impaired. This is 10% more who are practically not sufficiently taken into account with regard to inclusion. These include, for example, persons from immigration background with learning disabilities and so on. Finally, a total of 38 includes all mobility impaired persons with severe, moderate, or mild impairment. This is also includes mobility impaired single persons, persons with risk, poverty, and so on. A comprehensive view of mobility impaired from the subjective perspective of those affected shows that this number is far greater than we have defined in most national legislation. The figure 4 now shows the estimates of the people in Austria by different groups and extent individually perceived mobility impairment. These groups are divided into subgroups showing the existing governmental support to overcome specific mobility impairment in the categories A to E, with intensive support to no support. Overall, from a legal point of view, Group A and B received sufficient support from policies, but in practical implementation, there's still a big gap today. This is not only due to lack of financial resources, but in many cases also due to a lack of knowledge and engagement on those responsible persons. Next picture, please. No, please one back. A great hope for solving the current lack of support for people with mobility-related impairment could lay in the possibilities offered by the technology of automated mobility and digitalization. The question arises whether this can really be true. Automated moving pavement and automated lifts and escalators, for example, are not new mobility offers. Despite the long distance, they still cause many problems for people with impairment today. Drones, for example, the next please. Drones are a very ambivalent technology whose use in personal mobility is very questionable. Very important are the new technology opportunities for the pre-trip generation, preparation, and information about mobility offers, as well as the automated registration, ordering, and payment of ride requests. The on-trip service, such as automated continuously updated information, individualized information for users, and the stops or in the vehicle, and the post-trip service for automated post-treatments and realized trips, mobility behavior for persons' feedback and complaints. Next, please. Now, what are the main important mobility requirements of people with impairment? In principle, these are identical for conventional as well as automated and digitalized mobility. But the first tests of automated mobility show that these principles are far too little taken into account in practice. Because of lack of time, I limit myself only to the needs of following groups of often neglected impairments, which are hardly taken into account in mobility planning. It's people with learning difficulties. They request easy to understand language and texts and alternative offers to smartphones, apps. People with mental illness, they need space for retreat and quiet zones, areas free from sensory overload to avoid panic attacks, etc. People with chronic enteric disease, they need functioning public toilet facility, for example, and people with multiple impairments, they request inclusion of the two-sense or multi-sense principle. Now I hand over to Christopher for the second part of this presentation.
Good. So Gerd described in some kind of, must say, pioneering work, the situation of people with disabilities in Austria. But what's the future, and which futures are implied in the uses of technology and infrastructure? In part of a project we did together, we analyzed some imaginaries, so visions of the future, of the past and the present. And what we see is that in a way, the future didn't change. So in the 50s, of course, you had the idea that the highway is everywhere, but you have the metropolis still in the background, and in the foreground is the car driving to some place where maybe the observer is standing. And this seems to be true in the other picture which you see on the right hand, where you have a Navia automatic bus, which Navia is a European manufacturer who is doing pioneering work in automated driving, public transport for the most part. And of course, the in-between space in between the observer and the metropolis is now green space. It's used for this is the post-industrial society, in fact, which you see. But if you look closely to the little figures there and to the people inhabiting these places, there are no disabilities. People with disabilities do not appear in the picture, and also hardly there is also hard, but it's also difficult. So the racial differences are also not implied, but disabilities are not part of the future and the past and the present. And this is, in a way, this is the problem we have when we talk about disabilities in connection with, in relation to automated driving. So of course, when we did kind of SWOT analysis, where we see it just present some opportunities the automated mobility offers, but also some threats. So increased traffic safety is, of course, especially for people with disabilities, of course, a big opportunity, a big positive thing for automated driving, which implies then opportunities for participation in social life, increasing technology acceptance. In a way, could be an effect, a positive effect, cost reduction and efficiency increase of municipal services, development of fields of activity and business models which improve inclusion. So there's also some promises for the economy and expansions of good practices of inclusion to other fields of activity, because the realm of traffic is, in a way, the place where most social life happens. But the threats are also not to be neglected, that user requirements for vehicles and operation points are not considered. So new barriers to accessing information are also implied. There might be higher traffic volume, especially due to increasing automated private motorized transport. It's the biggest problem, in a way, in looking at the development of the traffic system. Technology skepticism, partly induced by job losses, might arise. Financial overburdening, who pays all these services, and the maintenance. Selection of suitable first test users is important for the implementation process if you do not take care of these processes adequately. And what also might happen, the situation-induced fears and stress in the use of new automated mobility services. For example, if there is no operator who can help you, then you might shy away from using these robots, in a way. So when we take from a higher perspective, from the perspective of societal evolution, inclusion, in fact, takes place, but it's a long-term and it's a slow process. So on the level of society, legal norms which are based on human rights, this is the last reference point, are taking place. These processes are taking place. There is also, we see also a move away from treating people with disability in terms of illness. So this would be the medical model of illness. And we move to a much more social and political model of illness, which says that barriers are made by society and it's not the fault of people disabilities, but there is also some development to say that people with disabilities are just normal people, the normality principle. But this is more part of the future. Stakeholder groups and lobby groups are developing. The strongest are, of course, those for blind people and those who use wheelchairs. So they have strong lobby groups, but those, for example, with cognitive disabilities or with mental illnesses, they are still underrepresented in public discourse. And we also see interesting processes in the economy. It's called adaptive upgrading. This is old Parsonian language, so that situations are also accessible to people, to persons. This is an adaptive problem. It's an economical problem in the last place. And the Design for All movement is trying to solve this issue in an inclusive way. Yes. We in the project we did together, we distinguish between a number of strategies to strengthen inclusion, strategy of expansion, the use, for example, the use of automated vehicles in public transport, catching up strategies, for example, inclusion-oriented adaptation of the test procedures for the approval of automated mobility, or the adaptation of the professional profiles of public transport employees. So these combine, in a way, weaknesses and chances of from the SWOT analysis. Avoidance strategies, for example, develop frameworks for the inclusion of persons with disabilities in technology development. So to avoid exclusion by including people in the development processes already, and hedging strategies, for example, preventing people with disability from being put at risk by automated mobility. Yes. So different kind of strategies are needed in order to foster inclusion in the traffic system for people with disabilities. So to come to just some conclusions, automated mobility has a high potential for inclusion, really high potential, but it will not develop automatically. We need an inclusive vision, like I always talk about the vision all, which could complement the vision 0 of traffic safety. We need a sufficient knowledge base so that the problem must also be brought to the fore in terms of numbers and statistics, where Gerd did much work in Austria already. We need participative design processes involving all stakeholder groups, and not only the physically handicapped persons, because they already are very strong in the discourse, but also other groups of people with disabilities. And the most important measure or factor is that political enforcement is necessary by developing legal frameworks to standardize affordances for vehicles and infrastructure. So I stop here. Thank you. I hope that we are in time.
Thank you very much, Christopher and Gerd. Next presentation is for Dr. Bente Knoll. He has a quite impressive bio, they sent to me. So I will just highlight, he holds a master's degree in landscape planning and architecture, and a PhD in transport and traffic planning, and a certificate in mainstream gender and diversity in organization. So please, Bente, the floor is yours.
Many thanks. And also many thanks for having us here and for the opportunity that we can share our results of a study with you in 2 parts. And I'm very happy that Gerd and Christopher have already set the ground. So really the baseline for our study. And I want to talk now in the next upcoming 10 to 15 minutes about the components and also about requirements that are needed and are part of an inclusive automated mobility system. And I will also talk about recommendations that we developed for the Austrian landscape, for the Austrian environment. Let me first of all point out that our study that we are happy to present today to you is a study. It was not really a research project, but it was a study commissioned by the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation and Technology. So it's really seen as a research and development service. So we received a contract, and we received also a quite defined research agenda and also expected results. So it was really one of our main goals to develop recommendations that are useful for the political, for the politicians and also for the decision makers here in Austria. And let me start with just a short input on our definition of automated mobility. In our project, we understand automated mobility is understood to mean the increased use of information and communication technologies in the mobility sector, quite general and broad. So in our project and also in our upcoming recommendations and components of an inclusive mobility system, you will learn that we understand automated mobility not only for the vehicle sector itself, but also it's embedded in all areas of transport and mobility. So automated mobility is really not only about vehicles, but also about, for instance, the technical support that supports people on their journey, on the pre-trip, on-trip, and also on the post-trip area and stage of journey. And to understand what's our background of inclusion, we referred to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, especially to the Article 9, that is dealing with accessibility issues. And we really, and you can see that what Christopher has pointed out, that we really embedded a quite broad vision and definition of inclusion in our work and in our study. So it's really about inclusion is about enabling persons with disabilities to live independently, and they shall be able to live in all aspects of their life, and also transportation and information and communication is also a crucial part where people shall be enabled to live independently. And as you can see in the definition, also the state parties who signed the respective UN convention are responsible for. And this is just to inform you that in Austria in 2008, Austria has signed that specific convention. So it took just a couple of years that also in automated mobility issues, this perspective of inclusion has been brought up. Well, and with the increasing automation and digitalization and networking, we can see that there is an opportunity that automated mobility and in general, so let it be automated public transport systems or automated micro-public transport systems, automatic car sharing, but also automatic private cars. It's quite sure that these technologies will form an innovative, automated, networked and inclusive mobility. So they have really a huge potential. But it's really necessary when we take into account the perspective of people with impairments that it's necessary to guarantee a seamless and also inclusive mobility chain from door to door. So that really means the different perspectives and of people with impairments are taken into account. And what we know from our study, and we also included several groups of people with impairments in our participatory study, and we learned really a lot of people with impairments and disabilities that mobility barriers occur today. So it is a matter of fact, and it is also a fact of the day-to-day journeys of people with disabilities that they face, and that mobility barriers occur. And it's really needed when we think about future technologies that we really take all those crucial needs into account. And when it comes to, for instance, pre-trip requirements, it's really important to have a close look. Is it possible for people with impairments to get all the information needed about the automated mobility services? Let it be ordering or booking, payment processes. So are these ICT processes processes accessible for people with different impairment? And that also goes on to the on-trip requirements. So are there barrier-free access for people with disabilities to the automated vehicles at all stages of their journey? So that's really very important to take these perspectives into account when designing automated mobility. And in the on-trip stage of a journey, then it's really important to think about a journey starts when people leaving their front door. So it's really necessary to take a very close look on the perspective of the trip chains. That for sure also includes social adequate financing of automated mobility services, so that really these automated mobility services are services for all citizens according to the UN Convention. And in the stage of the post-trip and post-trip requirements, it's really important that the experiences of people with disabilities who have used the automated mobility system, that these experiences are also taken into account and are considered as complaints of other people are considered. So it's really important that there is a feedback loop to the operating company, that operating companies really take the experiences of people with disabilities into account. And there is one aspect I want to highlight, and it's also dealing or has a very huge gender impact. So it's quite important to take that perspective also from the gender lens into account. And it's about when it happens, what happens in cases of emergencies. And it's really important, and I just go back to my next slide, because that it's kind of really the overall cross-cutting issue of our components, that we really always take into account what happens in cases of emergencies, and that it's really important to focus all kinds of impairments. So to give you a practical example, for instance, in case of a sudden stop let it be an automated public transport system, then we have to take into account the different needs of people with impairments. And for instance, a person who is hearing impaired has other necessities than a blind person. So people with hearing impairments, they need information on time in, for instance, sign language. And people who are blind, they have access to the common, quite in the day-to-day practice, in the common information channel that is used in case of emergency. So normally information is provided via loudspeaker, and when it really comes to an inclusive and connected and automated mobility system, it's necessary that we take all different kinds of impairments into account. And that also means that people with disabilities are also part of the technology development, that they are really seen as active participators in development processes. And as different components of an ideal, inclusive, automated mobility system, we developed in our study 8 different components. Due to the time, it's not possible to dig into detail of into all of those components, but I think the graph is quite clear that it's really an holistic approach is needed, and that we do not only take the perspective of the vehicle or of a car into account, but also we are talking about environment, organization. That means also the business entities who are the operators of automated mobility systems. We also have to think about coding and about inclusive regulations, standards, and also funding. So who has access and who can afford different automated mobility services. And as I mentioned before, it was a contract. We were commissioned by the Austrian Ministry, and we developed precise recommendations for the Austrian Ministry. And we first of all point out that it's highly needed to raise the awareness of the topic mobility of people with disabilities. So that's really a topic that is not taught at universities. It's not part of training civil servants undertake when they become decision makers in the ministry, for instance. And it's also very important to integrate the gender dimension when we do awareness raising. Legal framework. As I mentioned before, it's important to involve people with disabilities also in testing environments and to develop new technologies together with people with disabilities. So really to work with people with disabilities, not for them, but with them. So really, and that is also something where the decision makers, let it be the public ministry or also research funding organizations, play a crucial role because they develop the framework. Then when it really comes to the service and to automated mobility services, in order to ensure that these services are really inclusive, it's important, and that is really one of the main results of our study, that people with disabilities, they need a human fallback. So that is really 100% necessary for an automated inclusive system, that we include human fallbacks. So that is, in fact, that would also be would also need that we maybe talk about the different levels of automated mobility we all know. So we have to think about, is it really well, an aim or an objective to reach the level 5 in the next decades. Then uniform standards and norms that also integrate the perspectives and the needs of people with disabilities is needed. So it has something to do with barrier-free entries and exits and so on. And last but not least, next to the raising awareness and all those political recommendations, it's also needed that we promote research in the field of human-machine interaction. So we have to learn more about interaction of people with disabilities and technologies. So that's really a high important recommendation, that we include people with disabilities, but also take the gender dimension into account. And let me finish my talk with, on one hand, thank you, and also with a citation of our study, Automated Mobility Inclusive. It is only available in German, but in case you want to read it, we are happy and also provide the link. We will be happy to provide the link in the chat box. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Bente. Next speaker is Akito Higatani. I don't know if he's in the room at this moment.
I'm afraid he's not. So
can you check the emails, because the following speaker, just in case he has not received or is in the other room. So I will give the floor.
Okay,
I will give the floor. Yes.
If you want to send me the email, I can send again the link.
No, I don't know the email of.
Because Fuentes, I think, she wrote already, so maybe we can start with Jose.
Yes. What I was asking to you is to check the mail of Akito Higatani. So next speaker will be José Solaz, Dr. José Solaz. He has a PhD in mechanical engineering, and he has worked for several automobile companies since 1994. His work is linked to the field of ergonomics and human factors, and his last work deals with the interaction with the new autonomous vehicles technology and how it will impact on the human behavior. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ricard. I hope you can see my presentation. Can you? Yeah?
Yes.
Ricard, can you? Yeah, cool. So thank you. And my conference will be somehow open, and the main goal is to talk a little bit about how we are dealing from driver and occupants. And as you see in the first slide, so the concept of automatic vehicle is something quite old. But let me go to the topic. When we talk about autonomous vehicles, so most of us think about completely autonomous vehicle, but probably most of you are familiar with the 5 levels defined by SAE about what's an autonomous vehicle. So from no automation at all, level 0, to full automation, level 5, there are several degrees, and technology is going to be developed to reach different levels of automation, from driver assistance, that's probably the one that you have in your cars, to semi-autonomous or partial autonomous vehicles, the conditional automation, and the high automation, in which you say the car goes from A to B, and then the car is able to drive automatically in a certain environment, for example, in a traffic jam or in a highway. So to reach that, and the reason why we deal with autonomous vehicle is based in several factors. So there are societal factors, like the getting old of the population. There are more people living alone. We are more connected. We are more dependent of technology, of the economy. So the appearance of crypto money, the blockchain, economic threats, and finally some technological, obviously, innovations like the avatars, nanotechnology, user-sensitive artificial intelligence. So if we put together all those ingredients, so we have the keys of which will be or can be the future of the autonomous vehicle. So basically the vehicles in the future should be more sensitive, more intelligent, more connected, environmentally friendly, and public. So each one of those concepts is quite complex and is going to be developed during the following years. But we don't really know what will happen in the future. What's very interesting about autonomous vehicle is that it can be very useful, really, for long trips in the road when you have to recover long distances. And in a study made some years ago, people talk about the things that they can do inside the vehicle. So if you read that, so probably think that people is doing it right now. So you keep it doing it, but in a safer manner because of the car, which is control instead of you. When thinking about autonomous vehicle, manufacturers think on different scenarios, different possibilities, like obviously sleeping, chatting or sharing during a trip. But most of the scenarios that they design are quite ideal. And as you see, they are great cars, perfect cars, most of them driving in all alone roads with people that's between 20 and 35 years old, like probably like not all of us. There appear new problems when we go to the reality of autonomous vehicle. So when you try to sleep and eat with somebody, you need some intimacy. Maybe you want to socialize in some cases, like you see in the scenario number 6, or both users can sleep, or one can be in private and the other needs to eat. So let's think in the autonomous vehicle like not really something that you're going to use by yourself in an ideal world. So we probably are thinking in shared vehicles in which concepts like safety, security, intimacy will appear. So the ideal world developed by engineers maybe is not that ideal when we go to the real scenarios. Again, going to the engineers, so we have fantasies about what would be like the autonomous vehicle. So we're thinking about something very technological, so very full of light, something that will permit us something like living in the future. And indeed, there are plenty of new technologies that might permit that, but that nowadays are not that developed. So the fully autonomous vehicles is still so far because some situations are not completely solved. The way in which people drive is quite different of what a robot or autonomous system drives like. Besides, there's a plenty of cultural background that make us really different from one country to another. The need of including biometric access or biometric measurements to know about the user also opens a new question about privacy, sharing data. It's interesting to know more about the health monitoring, and probably you will be plenty of hours in a system that can be accident prone. So it's very important to know where the user is and how the user is in order to let them retake control when they need to. Besides, we're thinking about a car in which there will be new tasks to do. So we need reconfigurable body panel with reconfiguration of the vehicle in time. So that's not easy to solve and opens a plenty of new problems. So we are not thinking in a car as we are thinking right now. Something that's been forgotten, and I think that's interesting to deal with, is that who's behind the wheel. So manufacturers think mostly on a percentile 50 male when they design the cars. So although there are some interesting initiatives like the Volvo one, like the EVA initiative that talks about equal vehicles for all, in which the sex is introduced in the concept of defining safety, unfortunately, that's not that normal. And still we are thinking autonomous vehicle designed for average male, which is it's a big mistake for plenty of reasons, but one of them is because of the wide variety of uses and manners of interacting with the vehicle that people has. Some years ago, before pandemic, we had a session in Milan in which we tried to imagine potential uses or potential use cases. So of these autonomous shared vehicles, and things like a family with parents, a kid and a pet, and the same car to be used by a professional woman traveling for work during the night, for a meeting in the morning, or a scenario in which a rental car for several colleagues in a trip for the company has to be shared. So they have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to rest inside. Thinking also in cargo delivery trucks in which you have 2 or 3 workers that they need to to be working at the same time delivering packages, so they have to get in and out of the vehicle. And finally, in the most extreme case in which an autonomous car can take 4 different people, perfect strangers that need their intimacy, and they don't need to be necessarily friends or the same age. So these new scenarios appear, and they will make the concept of autonomous vehicle more and more complex as we approach to the real uses and the real life. All these concepts and the real use has a plenty to do with acceptance. I mean, are we willing, are we open to use this autonomous vehicle? If some people, and I explained that autonomous vehicle will tackle most of the problems related with safety. So there'll be less crashes because the vehicles will behave in a manner that they understand with each other. They will take our place in driving when there's a problem or with a crash or probability of crash. So they can stop boredom, they can reduce drowsiness, they can make plenty of things, but still we need to trust in them. We need to trust in our robot in some manner. And again, with trustworthiness, there are interesting differences in sex and in gender. So women are less enthusiastic than men about the prospects of driverless cars. So as I mentioned before, it's supposed to bring fewer deaths, but again, we used to be blind to social issues like gender parity and diversity. The companies need to consider women's concerns about the technology. It could be exacerbated by worries about personal safety and lack of accountability when there is no driver present. So if manufacturers of cars still think in a male perspective, they are they are losing a plenty of info that will increase acceptability. As I mentioned before, the risk for the women is much higher to be seriously than men, and in that sense, as I mentioned before, even though we have the EVA example, it's not clear that there are more approaches than this. In the same sense, I mentioned before that in the ideal world, we think that you will have your your autonomous vehicle, but in the real world, probably the cost of the vehicle will be really high. So you probably need to share the vehicle, and sharing means saving, mostly when you're considering a car with so much technology that would be really expensive. So this chart shows which is the save with car sharing instead of purchasing a vehicle. So probably if the cars become more and more complex, more and more expensive, and more autonomous, the idea of sharing cars could prevail on having your own vehicle. But there appears again another topic, that's the expectancy versus reality. So you, in an ideal world, you expect that somebody like a very elegant woman driving the car, in a very fancy manner. But in reality, if you share a vehicle, probably people use it like in their normal life. They will carry their dogs, they will eat on the vehicle, because as you saw before, people want to eat in the vehicle. They rent the car for an excursion with a family, so they will use it in a normal, scenario. I don't want to extend much more. I just want to let some topics open for reflection. What I tried to summarize in some manner here in this slide is that the autonomous vehicle need to overcome the uncanny valley. Like in the Bukimi no Tanigetsu, that's the problems that were shown in robotics, in which there's a relation between the affinity or the likeliness of a robot compared with the human likeliness, which you see in the chart in the left. So the higher the graph is that you feel more compatible, you like this technology, and the lower the values that you deny, you don't want to have this technology. So the humanoid robots are well accepted, but if you go too far and you are not able to go through this uncanny valley, so you probably will have a solution that is too near of the perfection but suddenly falls because there's a technological gap between your nowadays technology and your objective. So if you go farther than you can do, you probably have something that's completely rejected. We thought that something similar can happen with autonomous vehicle. Nowadays, you use ADAS, like lane departure warning or frontal collision warning in your car, and you're very happy with it. But if you go a little bit far and you expect that your vehicle is like, completely autonomous and it fits with you, being man, woman, or children, or any kind of family, and it is not. So there will be a crash in the technology, and all the work done until now will be completely lost. So we need to take gender issues into consideration. We have to consider who is the real user, why is going to use the vehicle, and put the user in the center of the autonomous vehicle. Otherwise, we will fall in the uncanny valley, and we will lose all the advantages that the autonomous vehicle might have. Thank you for your time, and I'm open to any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jose. So next we will open the floor to Akito. So please, the floor is yours. No? Mr. Higatani has a PhD in civil engineering and an important experience in maintenance, construction, and traffic management of expressway in Japan. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Can you share your screen, Akito? Do you have any problem?
No.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you show my presentation?
Yeah. Right now you are showing your screen with the program GoToMeeting. So maybe you have to change to the PowerPoint or PDF.
Ooh.
Have you the PowerPoint presentation open?
Yes.
So you have to choose your screen. Okay.
Can you see my presentation? No?
No.
Oh.
Do you have two screens?
No.
Okay. And please open the. Do you have your presentation open? Okay. That's it.
Oh.
Perfect.
Oh, okay, sorry. So, hi, this is Akito Higatani speaking in Japan. So, I'm sorry I'm late. So today's presentation title is the impact of autonomous vehicles on traffic flow. So nowadays, the dramatic progress of ITS makes auto-driving technology highlighted. Toyota, which is one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world, made a presentation about the future image filled with autonomous vehicles named Impaired, for example. So it can be said that people are enthusiastic about the term autonomous vehicle. People will become free from driving, and people do meeting or having a break or reading newspaper in their vehicles, like a second house. And such a situation like a dream will achieved in the future. So, well, this is the main question of this study. So, do autonomous vehicles have a good effect on the congestion? So, the answer to that question have not been found out even now. Some people say, yes, of course, there will be no congestion in the future. But other people say it's not always, sometimes worse. So in this study, we investigated the impact of autonomous vehicles on traffic flow using microsimulation model. So this is a microsimulation network. So it is created using BESIM. The network is 5.5 kilometer and 2 lane, and it has 3 merging sections. This network reproduces a part of Hanshin Expressway network to Osaka City. So this route to Osaka City has one of the severest traffic congestion in this network. The maximum traffic volume of this line reaches over 46,000 vehicles per day. And the lane changing model is internal model of BESIM. And the car following model for human is IDM Plus. And this is IDM Plus. S here, so S asterisk is the dynamic desired gap. It is calculated every 0.1 second. And A is the maximum acceleration. And B is the desired deceleration. And T is the desired time gap. The feature of this model is the non-linear response to speed differences. So this model is quite robust and user-friendly model to simulate human driving behavior. And the car following model for autonomous vehicle is Henry FSS model. And this is Henry FSS model. And Henry model is a simple model. So vehicle acceleration is controlled by the distance gap and speed difference like this first equation. In this study, we gave a little update to Henry model. The concept of sensor detection range and enhanced brake function and speed and acceleration regulation was introduced in this model. And every autonomous vehicle has a time gap setting. It is represented by T. A time gap setting of autonomous vehicle has 4 patterns like these: very short setting, and short, middle, and long. And in order to set the ratio of 4 types of time gap control setting, we calculated the ratio of time gap setting by using this graph. This graph is made by using real vehicle trajectory data in this network. So this figure shows the distribution of the time gap under 3 seconds for 50 minutes. The mean value is 1.55 seconds, and that is the value of the desired gap for human drivers in this simulation. And from this distribution, we estimated the ratio of time gap setting of autonomous vehicles. For example, in the very short setting, we picked up the number of 1.1 second and 1.2 and 1.3, and I totaled the numbers, and the number is 2,812, and then calculated the ratio of each setting. 33% and 29% and 24% and 14%. Then, then using the microsimulation model and data I mentioned, we evaluated traffic congestion in 10 cases. From number 1 to 7, percentage of autonomous vehicle changes. 1 is 100% and number 7 is 0%. And the maximum acceleration of autonomous vehicle is 0.6 meter per second square in these cases. The value is smaller than that of non-autonomous vehicle, so which is 1.4 meter per second square for human drivers. In case number 8 and number 9, maximum acceleration of autonomous vehicles changes from 0.6 to 1.4 meter per second square. In case number 10, maximum acceleration of autonomous vehicles is still 0.6 meter per second square, but the time gap setting of all autonomous vehicles set to be very short setting. So this is result, and the traffic congestion is evaluated by total loss time. So this equation. So loss time is calculated by this formula, and Q is traffic volume, and V is speed, and VR is regulation speed, and L is length of the section. According to the results of case number 1 to 7, so loss time clearly increases with the percentage of autonomous vehicle rising. That's because the average desired time gap of autonomous vehicle is around 1.7 second in this simulation, so which is longer than the non-autonomous vehicle's desired time gap, which is 1.55 second. An autonomous vehicle's speed recovery after the speed reduction was slower than non-autonomous vehicle's speed recovery. So because the maximum acceleration of autonomous vehicles was set to 0.6 meter per second square. And comparing the results of case number 5 with case number 8, this one and this one, and the percentage of autonomous vehicle is same, 25%, but loss time of case number 8 is smaller than case number 5. In case number 8, the maximum acceleration was changed from 0.6 to 1.4. On the other hand, comparing the results of case number 8 with case number 9, the loss time of case number 9 is smaller than that of case number 8. That's because the maximum acceleration was changed from 0.6 to 1.4, and all the vehicles are autonomous vehicles in case number 9. And the Heli FSSM model, so that is a car following model for autonomous vehicle, is better at accelerating than IDM Plus. So in other words, if enough autonomous vehicles are in the network, increasing maximum acceleration makes a significant contribution. And finally, so traffic congestion didn't occur in case number 10. So because the desired time gap setting of all the vehicle was set to be very short, that means they follow their leading vehicles with very short time gap. So autonomous vehicle accelerates slower than non-autonomous vehicle because of the maximum acceleration, so which is 0.6 meter per second square in case number 10. In spite of that, reducing average time gap seems to have more powerful impact on traffic congestion than increasing maximum acceleration. So this is conclusion and discussion. In this presentation, we investigated the impact of autonomous vehicles on traffic flow using microsimulation model. Then we found that autonomous vehicle doesn't always have a good effect on the congestion through the case study. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akito. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but I think your study was interesting to at least question what is the. We assume that with autonomous vehicles we will gain better traffic flow, and putting numbers and a model functioning, we get that is maybe not always the case. From the organization, they said to me that we have the possibility to make some questions, because the other session goes also with some delay. So I don't know if you want to add, if there is any question, or if some of you, after listening to the other panelists, you want to add something to what you have already said. Okay, so the first presentation, you talk about disability, and it's a long time. I come from the field of the disability, not related to mobility, but to architectural, urbanistic, or other types. And I sometimes I have the feeling that we are always in the same, we are running, coming back to the same place of to the beginning point, no? Let's say. So from this aspect, what would you think would be the key element that in 10 years time or 20 years time, when maybe we have a lot of automated mobility on the road, there is not still this gap between the opportunities of mobility for people with any kind of disability, people with don't have these sort of added problems. I don't know if Bente, you can give your opinion on that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So that's also something that I've faced in my work for years, that it really seems that we discuss about the same issues again and again and again. That's why we were very happy that we got the contract and really also the the agenda to develop policy recommendations. And we really tried to point out that it's really needed that the standards and norms, they really have to be implemented, and they have to be also addressing the needs of people with disabilities. And in fact, that we also formulated that as a recommendation, that people with disabilities shall be active users in testing environments. So in fact, it's the problem. It's the problem in Austria, in other countries all over Europe, so that public money is spent for testing environments without including people with disabilities. And from my point of view, that's a political decision. And in fact, it's under the responsibility of public funders, let it be ministry when it is national money, or European Commission. So that should not be the case anymore. And from my point of view, the regulations, the legal framework, it's already here. It has to be implemented into practice, and that is a responsibility of decision makers. We, from research and from the consultancy, we know what people should do, but we are not in the we are not the decision makers. We can only recommend, we can only give advice, we can develop guidelines. There are lots of guidelines out there. So it's really a political decision that these regulations really come into place. They are forced, and we also have to discuss about what happens if some research project or the industry does not stick to the regulations. But that's also a political discussion. So sorry for being so strict on that.
I want to add a few comments for that. You must be aware that the legal framework is okay if we consider the European level, but it's not so well done if you look to the national level. In a lot of countries, that's the same in Austria. We have some specific framework which shows the future for example, people with blind people and so on, but not for the whole range of impairment. And that's very important that we increase the improvement of the political framework on the local level. And the second issue, and it is familiar with that, is the question of awareness. The awareness of most of the people dealing with planning issues. That's also a question of education at the university, I must say, to my own society. Okay, we have a lot of gaps in this issue. Thank you.
Another point probably Dr. Solaz can extend a little bit is about the acceptance of the vehicles, autonomous vehicles, in the sense that there are also different attributes that make easier or makes put other difficulties to accept the autonomous vehicle. He was comparing with the robotic, or I thought about personal assistance, robotics, and he drew this graph with the curve that maybe we have too high expectancies about what could be the future of the autonomous vehicles. When we find that they do not do what we expect, we think they are not good enough. Or I don't know if Dr. Solaz is still connected.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I closed the camera. I think that we're going to see a steady development on incorporation of the functions of the autonomous vehicle. So we are involved in several projects with companies, with tier 1 and OEMs. And the idea is to incorporate functions in a sort of level 2, level 3 vehicle at the first stage. So level 2 autonomous vehicle mean that the vehicle will be autonomous driving in some places, but you have to be looking at their function. So people don't want that kind of product, will pay for something that they can do because they have to be aware. Level 3 means that the vehicle can take the control, but he can call you to take control again if he finds a situation in which the car don't know how to react. That might mean that you can be, completely looking at another place, or you can lose control. So manufacturers right now are into something like, it's not really the name, but something that will be between level 2 and level 3. That will be useful to know if the acceptance is increasing, is growing. So they introduce probably that like a package, like they introduce safety at that moment of the comfort package, like like an extra product. So I think like in the case of ABS, in the case of the ESP, so we will see functions of autonomy that will be little by little be incorporated, not to crash and and to lose the big opportunity. But they have to the cover the acceptance of those solutions. So I think there will be baby steps.
I'm sorry we have to close the session. Thank you to all the speakers for this wonderful presentation and what you have shared with us. We have a lot of more questions and things to do, but now it's time to regroup to the general session, just to close this today working in this seminar. Thank you very much. Time
Thank
to
you.
go back to the
Bye.
to the session. Join.
Thank you.
Okay.
To meet all of you.
Bye.
Thank you all.
You have to use the same link, okay?
Okay.
Can you maybe share the link in the chat? Would be
No,
easier.
it's the personal link that you have on GoToWebinar, okay?
Okay, then
Thank
I'll
you.
check my mailbox. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.